Welcome back. So, we look forward, B'ez Hashem, continuing. I believe this is the 8th class on this epistle. Yes, we did mention in the past classes that this is quite a lengthier class. We did point out that Rebbe does something over here which a lot of the entire Sefer Tanya, or much of it, is based on this which the Alter Rebbe began with in the very beginning of Likutei Amorim, the first segment of Tanya, how the Nefesh has the 10 spheres, the 3 cognitive faculties, the 7 emotional faculties, and the reason why the Nefesh has it, because Nishtalshul Mihen, the Neshama is a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. On high, there's also the 10 spheres, of course established by Hashem himself. And because the Neshama comes from there, therefore the Neshama also has these 10 spheres, as they're called. Again, they're divided, compartmentalized in 3 and 7. 3 are the cognitive faculties, 7 are the emotional traits, and much of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe speaks about it in that very chapter 3, 3rd chapter. The Alter Rebbe elaborates how it exactly works, if you will. In other words, the function of the wisdom, understanding, and knowledge generically. This is a term for the Chochmah Bina Das, and eventually the Midas, though there in Gimel we mentioned quite a few times, if you look in the Gimel where the Alter Rebbe speaks about the function of these 10 spheres with which he began that very chapter, he stops by Chesed and Gvura. And he says the rest of the Midas are branches of Chesed. Well, these are the chief Midas, the rest are branches of it, and so many other times throughout Tanya. Of course, the Alter Rebbe speaks about these very 7 Midas. At the end of the day, Ava, Chesed is Ava, and Gvura is Yira, love of Hashem, fear of Hashem, reverence of Hashem, towards Hashem, and Tiferes, Rachamim, he has in Perik Memhei, famously in Tanya, Likutei Amorim, and other midas. I mean, this is where the Yid comes into the picture, or the Yid is the center of all Avodah, the center of the whole reason for which Hashem created the world, Lasas Leis Barach Dira B'Tachteinim, to establish this world as an abode for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Who does it is the Yid, and this is the inner workings of the Yid through which he or she executes their service, their mandate to establish for HaKadosh Baruch Hu a Dira B'Tachteinim, a dwelling place in this very physical world. Yet, the Alter Rebbe does not elaborate on these 10 faculties as much with such detail and specification like he does in the 15th chapter of Igeres HaKodesh, which is the 4th segment. We spoke about this so many times. There are 5 segments in Tanya, for that matter, corresponding to the Chamishi Chumshei Torah. I say corresponding not only because there's, this is 5 and this is 5. We know Tanya Kadisha is the Teresh Biksav of Teres Achsidus, thus 5. Igeres HaKodesh is the 4th segment. So the Alter Rebbe introduces this idea in the 3rd of Likutei Amorim, the 1st segment. And he doesn't elaborate on this, which again, such detail and specificity as much as till this Igeres HaKodesh, the 4th segment, and in the 4th segment, the 15th epistle. We mentioned many times, Igeres HaKodesh, these are epistles the Alter Rebbe wrote. Letters the Alter Rebbe wrote, different times, different situations which the Alter Rebbe addressed. We did mention we have a presentation in the beginning of Yud, need not to repeat, very beginning of Yud, the 10th chapter of 10th actually Igeres, which is 5 back, of the whole backdrop of Igeres HaKodesh. You can take a look. And when we say take a look, primarily we're referring to, wherever you're watching, but referring to the original website, Tanya Online, one word, tanyaonline.com, which is all the previous classes set up or posted. That is, for example, this Igeres, this is, we mentioned, is the 8th class on this Igeres, as it is a lengthier epistle. It's all on the website. It's a click away. The later classes are on the top, and then as you go down, you're able to find all the classes from the very beginning. Not only Igeres HaKodesh, of course, of Likutei Amorim, the first segment. So there's Likutei Amorim, Sheikhid B'Amunah, Igeres HaTshuva, Igeres HaKodesh, and eventually Kuntres Achrin. So all the classes are set up. As an example, we speak about the third chapter to realize where the Alter Rebbe, or to appreciate where the Alter Rebbe introduced this idea of the 10 spheres, which he's explaining here in this Igeres HaKodesh. It's worthwhile to look back there. Third, in Likutei Amorim, as an example. But in Arichos, in elaboration, this is the Igeres HaKodesh, where Alter Rebbe articulates every single one of the midah, the Chochmah, the Bina, the Das, the Chesed, the Gvura, every single midah. So he starts. So we were holding Kimachmas Avas Hashem Merev Chavtzel Daf Kobei. So this is on page Kuf Chav Gimel, the bottom of Kuf Chav Gimel. If you're following, let's try to really get into it right away. Minimally repeating of what we learned last week. But the overall, the Alter Rebbe shows us, before he gets into this which the Alter Rebbe is all about, enhancing the Yid's relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and utilizing their faculties, namely their rich faculties in this very connection, which is the cognitive faculties. Hashem didn't just establish us as human beings just to serve in robotically, which there's a dimension to that as well. So Alter Rebbe has in the famous chapter, Mem Aleph, the 41st, in Likutei Amorim, that in the end of the day it's about Kabbalah Sev Malchus Shamayim. Hashem is not a buddy. Hashem is a king of all kings. We submit ourselves, Kichol Eved, Avedis Eved Ladeini, like every service which a servant serves his master. And beyond that, we are subject towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the king, and not only king, again, Melech, Malchei Amlochim, and therefore we have to, whatever Hashem does, yes, we do with Kabbalah Seil, if we understand it, we didn't understand it. For that matter, this is predicated on the original acceptance of Am Yisrael when they received the Torah, the famous Nasa V'Nishma. They even said, yes, we're going to do because it's coming from you. We don't argue with Hashem. When Hashem says do, we don't give it much thought, we do it. We do it because we know how limited we are, and we know, again, it's coming from the infinite God, and therefore you didn't appreciate it that very juncture. That's why Hashem was very excited with that response. You're getting it. You're understanding where it's coming from. Therefore, Nasa and then Nishma. You have an opportunity to try to figure it out, but it's about submission. And that's the idea, the notion of Kabbalah El Malchus Shamayim. I don't understand it exactly. I'm doing it anyways, because it's coming from you. And that's what the Perek Mem Aleph invests so much relating to the Yid, that Hashem needs over love. Hashem is standing over you and wanting to see what's your next step, your next talk, your next thought. In a mitzvah say, mitzvah leisese, boichin kloyes v'leiv. He examines heart and intestines and hearts. Maybe they could have your serving because we're in a proper manner, understanding that He's a king. So yes, there is that dimension that we submit ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu robotically, even. But ultimately, if that was the case, and that's what Hashem only wanted from us, Hashem wouldn't give us these beautiful, rich faculties. He created every human being, particularly the Yid, which has this whole setup on the Nefesh Elikis, with the Nefesh Elikis of the 10 spheres, which we just mentioned, which each one of them is a unique and rich faculty. If it's the Chochmah, it's the Bina, it's the Das, the Midas, as an example. Hashem created us with these rich faculties. He, in the end of the day, wants us to utilize these rich faculties in our service to Him. For that matter, that's why it says Nasa V'Nishma, which those who ask the question, if Hashem was so excited about our overall submission to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, blind submission to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and rightfully so, so we should have just said Nasa. Why Nasa V'Nishma? Okay, the order is unique, that we understood and appreciate where it's coming from, so we submitted ourselves. We're going to do, and then we will listen, and then we will hear. Hearing in the context of appreciating, understanding, internalizing the message, identifying deeply with the message. But maybe we got more points if we only say Nasa. Who needs the Nishma? Hashem, your God, we're going to do because it's coming. These commands are coming from you. But it doesn't say anywhere that they just got 80%. Hashem was fully excited of that response of Am Yisrael at the time, Nasa v'Nishma, because Hashem does not want us to blank out, to erase this Nishma idea of our appreciation of our holy Torah and our holy mitzvahs and what the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is all about. He wants it to be predicated on Nasa, meaning to say, the basis is to be Kabbalah, so I'm accepting the yoke of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If I understand, if I don't understand, if I appreciate it, I don't appreciate it, if I'm excited about it, I'm not excited about it, I'm enthusiastic about it, or not, I do it. But at the end of the day, Hashem established by every single human being, in particular these rich faculties of Chochmah Bina Das and the emotional faculties. Hashem doesn't want us to ignore them. Hashem gave it to us for us to enhance this relationship and to deepen this relationship. That this relationship should be in a way that I can utilize my intellectual faculties and opportunities to be able to have a clear appreciation, clarity in the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which Hashem Himself opened that window. We have the ability to, especially with our Nefesh Elikis, which is part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be able to really understand and appreciate the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu deeply, profoundly. And then Hashem says, V'ahavta, you have a heart, you're able to love this person or anything we gravitate to. No, V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha, you could establish a passionate love with your Creator, like the famous Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva. What a description that Rambam gives, worthwhile to see. A real passionate, fervorous love a Yid can have to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So if He gave you a heart and He gave you these 7 faculties, emotional faculties, it's meant to be utilized, not to be ignored. So there's a whole rich system, an organized system of the Chabad and the Midas, Chochmah Bina Das and the Midas, that a Yid could connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu intimately, in an intimate level. And then, of course, is Mashava Dibur Ma'aseh, thought, speech, and action. This is where we execute our commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, our learning Torah, doing mitzvahs. Again, you see Perek Daled, which speaks about thought, speech, and action, follows Perek Gimel. And for that matter, he says, yeah, this in the end of the day becomes most important. Because if you love Hashem and you're excited about HaKadosh Baruch Hu and you have a profound understanding and appreciation of the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but you're not doing what Hashem wants, of course, not good. Conversely, if you do what Hashem wants, you're fulfilling the purpose for which Hashem created the entire world. In the end of the day, this thought, speech, and action, by definition, carries so much more depth, if you will. In other words, depth in context of the fulfilling our mandate in connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the way that He wanted us to connect to Him, that it should not remain aloof in the world of understanding, even comprehensively and perceiving the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is wonderful, beautiful, extremely noble, and then establishing an emotional relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's stupendous, it's wonderful. But what does the Eibishter want? At the end of the day, He wants that mezuzah up on your door. And He wants the tefillin to be put on, to be donned. And He wants Shabbos to be kept. And He wants kashrus to be kept. And so on and so forth. He wants us to learn Torah constantly. Because this is, in the end of the day, the actual Ratzon Hashem prescribed to us in the Torah. To do what HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lishmer v'lases olakayim. That's called the Yisrael Matera Sechem, which means this is the mandate. This is the ultimate mandate. And if you think about it, you can appreciate it easily in the relationship of man and another fellow man. Any type of relationship, a spousal relationship. Of course, there's a way that a person connects deeply and intimately with another party, but if it doesn't come across in a way to do the simple things on a daily basis, the simple responsibilities which one has, which seems to be trivial, just do that, and whatever, the regular things. We gave many times example, the classic of the responsibility of taking out the garbage as an example. Silly example, but this seems to be what's the connection in the relationship. No, but if you're doing what the other party wants you to do in a way that demonstrates responsibility, even though it seems like a dry action. A silly example, but just the idea to understand That in the end of the day, it's about actualizing where it counts, where it makes a difference, being responsible, going out and making a parnasa, as an example, responsibility with children, educating children, responsibility if it's homework or these things. What's the connection of my relationship with the other party? And the answer is no, this is extremely crucial, because if you don't have that, of course it'll just disintegrate as quick as it comes. That's how quick as it can go. Conversely, when we have the opportunity to connect deeper with another party, we don't shun that. And the contrary, this is significant on its own, as we can only, this is easier to understand and appreciate, but we understand they both complement each other, which is nasa v'nishma, if you will, from a certain perspective and point of view. Even though here the nasa is before, but the idea that they ought to be both. And the same thing with someone, the party comes in and they're in the context of giving, kindness. Person's hungry and they're poor, hungry, vulnerable. Oh, I feel so much for you. My heart goes out to you, and you could even shed a tear, a real tear. But if you don't go to your pantry, your closet, take out the loaf of the piece of bread and give it to the other party that they could soothe their hunger, you missed out the most important part. The person's hungry. Or prepare them a nutritious meal, a satisfying meal. Then you connected that emotion to an action, which is the most important. The person's hungry. Yeah, it's a pity on him, and they also need words of comfort. Even in this case, it's not a matter you're like an automatic robot. Okay, here, take out the meal and please have a seat. And, in a one word, there's your bed for lodging or whatever it is, whatever the person needs. No, you put in your emotions as well. You sympathize, you empathize with the other party. Which, for that matter, even from the perspective of halacha, the Gemara says, it's brought in halacha, that it's vital that we talk words of sympathy and comfort to with the party who we're identifying with and providing for. It becomes part of the halacha, because the Eibishter wants both of them. And so too, of course, in relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's about, at the end of the day, the Alter Rebbe says in Perek Dalet, even more than everything, more than your emoting with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, more than your profound understanding the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, illustrated in the 3rd chapter of Likutei Amorim. But first, you get a click away. Likutei Amorim, the first segment. Alter Rebbe follows in Perek Dalet with Machshava Dibur Maisa, thought, speech, and action, and he goes on. He says that's where it really counts. For that matter, the neshama emoted and had a clearer understanding of the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu before. It descended into a body, invested into a body. What is the purpose of taking that neshama and investing it into a body? Again, with all the deficiencies which come along with that package, if you will. And removing it even from the opportunity to have, so to say, can't say limitless, but a free connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way that the neshama was able to understand. And Neni Miziv Ashchin, like it says about the neshama in Gan Eden, it has a beautiful comprehension and deep appreciation of the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, much more than when the neshama is invested in body. Even though there we also have to have that Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, to ponder and to really understand and perceive. It's our mandate to have some clarity. That Hashem Elokeinu and Hashem Echad, and to always establish a true Ava, true love from myself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're mandated to do so, but nonetheless you can't compare, and it should be real. Avas Hashem is not a badge. Yiras Hashem is not a badge. Ava is love, and love is authentic. Love ought to be authentic, or if it's love, it's authentic. And Hashem wants to have the human being, the Yid, loving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'ahavtas Hashem lekecha, true love. But you can't compare. At the end of the day, Alter Rebbe has it in Tanya. We can appreciate also. Hashem is divested of body. It's free. It has that ability to have a much deeper understanding and comprehension in the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And thus, a greater love, a greater fear. So why would Hashem take the neshama and limit that experience one way or another? I say limit because at the end of the day we have to try to we're mandated to try to find the love and fear and try to have that understanding, the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But it limits it. Can't compare the neshama invested in body the way it's divested of body. So the whole reason is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted a dwelling place in this physical world, that the Yid should come down and deal with the physical world, elevate it, sublimate it, refine it, which is through taking a physical object and making it a existential mitzvah, doing a mitzvah with it thereafter. Like a mezuzah that began a parchment of an animal. And the ink was coming from the tree. Nothing particularly holy about it. Not necessarily it's unholy, but it's not holy. It's right in the middle. The Yid takes it, writes a mezuzah on it. The mezuzah becomes a cheftzah mitzvah, and beyond that, the Yid performs the actual mitzvah with that very parchment. That's the reason for creation. Why the neshama, Hashem took the neshama in, brought it into the body for that very reason. So therefore, by definition, this is much more special. At the end of the day, this is where we connect to the infinite. Ratzon Hashem, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what the Alter Rebbe points out in Dalet. Yeah, the experience is so much more noble and appreciative experience of the Perek Gimel, third chapter experience of the inner workings, the rich faculties of the neshama expressing themselves. But in the end, ultimately, Hashem created us to learn Torah and do mitzvahs, which we do with our machshava dibur ma'aseh, thought, speech, and action. Again, look at it there, Gimel and then Dalet. But what do you see over here? There's a whole package. A Yid has the ability to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu in so many different ways. It's one way, but it expresses itself in so many different avenues, different channels. One more rich than the other. Each one its virtue, and each one how it complements the other. So Alter Rebbe begins this chapter before he enters and explains us how every midah is connected with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He gives an example. This is what we learned in the last few weeks. A father and son, but again in the context of father being the teacher and the son being the pupil, the disciple, student, learning a concept. And the Alter Rebbe shows you the Chochmah, Midah, and Das. Or namely, starts with the Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. We mentioned Alter Rebbe doesn't have Malchus in this context, but this is all how the teacher transmits. Each one of these midas is reflected in the way the teacher transmits this information to the student. Proper teacher, of course. And then he goes on, it's based on Chochmah Bina Das of the teacher. And then Alter Rebbe, we began last week, he says, Kol Zeh Derech Mashal Avad. This is all an example. Should we read over these few lines? Let's do it, okay? Ki Kol Zeh B'nefesh HaSichel Tzatachtin Shabbat B'Mikludas Nega. This is an intellectual. Again, we had this. We explained these few lines a little more detail. It's important. Again, the last TanyaOnline.com, the same website. It's the very last class before this class that you're watching, which we elaborated on. This is Klipas Nega. What's the point of Klipas? What is the Klipas Nega? Which of course we introduced, cross-reference. Kuti Amorim. Alter introduces this. Actually, in the first chapter, later a little more elaborately in the sixth, and so on. But this comes from the intellectual soul, which comes with the when it comes to the supreme soul, the godly soul, which is Kamimal, which is part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kol Amidas Pnimis V'Chitzenis El Hashem Levadei. All the midas, all the attributes, all the inner, the character traits, the emotional traits, the inner and the external, as what Alter Rebbe says over here, that even Chesed and Gvura is the external, the way we execute this which stands behind Chesed. Explained this last week, which is love. Gvura is the way we execute this which stands behind the Gvura, which is fear, awe, reverence of Hashem. We spoke about this last week, so we came up to here. But the Nefesh Elikis, again, it's worthwhile even to these last few lines to see it in the last class. Again, if you're following, you notice what I'm saying because we took time, even the last few lines, to explain. But as we come into today's class, we're doing this briefly. Ultimately, the message that in the end of the day, the truth of the matter, that it is all much clearer, or much what it's really all about is about the way the Nefesh Elikis, the godly soul, expresses their relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, all these 10 faculties, in the way the neshama, the godly soul, connects with Hashem, with the source of this very godly soul, which is God Himself. So Alter Rebbe starts from Chesed. So again, this is where we left off. Ki machmas avos Hashem. So we start with Chesed, kindness. What stands behind? What's the pnimis of Chesed? Again, we explained last week, and many times again last week we spoke about this as well. The pnimis and the chitzonis, the avos Hashem, love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So where is love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Where does it? How does it express itself in the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with Hashem? Machmas avos Hashem, because of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because of the love of the Yid to Hashem, because of his great desire. Again, this is inherent. This is innate by the Yid, because he has a neshama, a godly soul. So he has that fervorous love. That was, again, we spoke about in Peri Gimel and Kuti Amarim, the first segment. The Rebbe shows us the X-ray of the neshama. So that's the neshama. This is the natural expression of the neshama. The neshama is, the neshama exists. What is the neshama? You learn Peri Beis. It seems like it's a strong beam of light, a godly light. Very strong godly light, of course. It's which is part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Comes out to the Peri Gimel, says, no, this godly light, this good neshama, is divided into 10 spheres. Oh, it's divided into 10 spheres. So what's the experience of these 10 spheres? The Rebbe navigates all these 10 rich faculties in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That the Yid has the Chachma, has the ability to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to have an understanding of Bina, the expansion of, it's not just a flash, oh, I got something. No, it's about the Yid has the ability to expand on their understanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and their appreciating the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And again, in a way of Bina, you can see there with expansiveness. Yeah, that's within it's innate and inherent, the Yid to have the ability to understand the Lakus. It seems so grand. How can I? Yeah, you have a Nefesh Elikis. And if you have a godly soul, the godly soul has these 10 faculties. So the godly soul has the ability to intellectualize. Of course, what is it intellectualizing on? Of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, its own source. It's not interested in anything else. The Nefesh Bahamis, the animal soul, is interested in things which are animalistic, bodily, and so on. The Nefesh HaSichli's approach is, like we spoke about it last week over here, it's things which are intellectual but not necessarily holy. But the Nefesh Elikis, it's a godly soul, and it has these rich 10 faculties, rich 10 faculties. So of course, if it has Chachma Bina, its understanding, its ability to understand and appreciate and really comprehend and perceive the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if it has Ava V'yira, love, it has the ability to have this passion and love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the chesed, the pnimis of the chesed of the neshama. The love, the passionate, fervent love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then Yira. And so on all the other midas. So Alter Rebbe begins over here, because the love is Hashem, because, again, from the perspective of the godly soul, with his great desire, motivation, and Lidov Koboy, to cleave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to adhere to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chofetz Chesed, Kidei Lidovko, more so, not only he has that love to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but there's the chitzenius of the love, which is the actual chesed, the execution of kindness. I love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore I emulate HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And where do we see that a Yid has to be somewhat connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the extent that he has to emulate HaKadosh Baruch Hu? This is a Gemara. The Gemara says, L'daf kabay, to cleave, to adhere to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hadvik b'midaisav, adhere to Hashem's characters. And it says, just like Hashem does kindness, you should do kindness as well. Hashem visit the sick, do the same, and so on. The Gemara mentions, based on different psukim in Torah, which besides the overall, of course, Hashem is Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, everything about life comes from the kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but the overt expressions of kindness which we see in the Torah, Hashem says, you love Hashem, Hadvik Midaisov, adhere to Hashem's midas, do the same. And if Hashem provides for the poor, do the same. Give tzedakah, give a lot of tzedakah. Do gemilas chasadim, do a lot of gemilas chasadim. Because you love Hashem. This is who you are. You have an neshama which loves Hashem. And because you love Hashem, to adhere and cleave to Hashem, you love to do kindness in order to cleave to adhere Hashem's midas. Like the Chazal tell us, on the pasuk Dovka, adhere to Hashem, adhere to Hashem's midas. Do what Hashem does. And you do it perfectly. And you'll do better tomorrow. You give more tzedakah today and even more tomorrow. Because this is so natural for your nefesh, because you love Hashem. And therefore, the execution of that love would be, of course, the kindness that you do in many different ways. Similar to the one who you love does it, of course, Hashem. And now he crosses over to the midah of Gvura. So you see over here how chesed is channeled towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I just want to mention that if you look in Gimel, it comes from a little different perspective, not so much the actually doing or emulating HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ways. There he speaks about the Ava itself. There he speaks about the pnimius of the Ava, which is the love, the passion, the love. Simply, love is a feeling. Love is a sensation. So there in Gimel, he speaks about the pnimius of the Ava, which is the actual experience of the love itself, the passionate love of Yiddah HaKadosh Baruch Hu. To what degree? Like the Rambam says, can't stop thinking about Hashem, with the example he gives, famously the Rambam. And to the extent by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's Klois HaNefesh, to the extent that the soul is so animated to be connected, passionate, animated, to be connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even it means exploration of body, like we find classically by Nadav Avihu, famous Eirach Chaim HaKodesh, that Nadav Avihu had such a desire to be one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they were okay to leave their bodies behind, and so they did. As it says, the bodies were intact, but the neshamas left the bodies because they wanted to, again, the lotion of the Eirach Chaim HaKodesh in this story of Nadav Avihu, that they were just so in love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they just wanted to connect, intimately connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Whenever it got in its way, it let it go. And in the end, the body got in the way, so the body was let go. And by definition, the Yid has that as well, because the Yid is a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he wants to intimately connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Klois HaNefesh, like David HaMelech says, Tzoma L'cha Nafshi, actually I love to remember there, third chapter, Koti HaMarim, first segment, brings these psukim, Tzoma L'cha Nafshi, David HaMelech says, I thirst for you. Kama L'cha V'sari, I go out, I pour out, my heart is has this deepest, fervorous desire towards you. To the extent he says, Klois HaNefesh even. So there, Perek Gimel speaks about the Ava, the pnimius of the Ava. Here, the Alter Rebbe speaks about the chitzains, of the execution of the Ava. I love you, Hashem. I want to do, and I'm going to emulate, identify with your midas and your, again, the Gemara, which speaks about the different times that Hashem, as we get, make no mistake, Hashem is constantly, like it's Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, everything that comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, of course, based on HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Chesed, but different stories in the Torah which the Gemara pinpoints and says, look, Hashem was Gemel Chesed, Hashem visited the ill, for example, by Avraham Avinu, and Hashem covered the uncovered story, the story with Adam and Chava, and in other words, gave them the ability to make them comfortable, that they shouldn't feel ashamed, and so on. The different midas with the Gemara, and it's brought L'Halacha as well in the Rambam. And because a Yid loves HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so he wants to emulate HaKadosh Baruch Hu, identify him. Hashem, you're a Gemel Chesed, of course I'll do Chesed. I'll do a lot of Chesed. And we say give tzedakah, I'll give a lot of tzedakah. And from here, so we see over here, the Chesed, the way it's identified in Avodas Hashem, again, the Chesed is also within Nefesh Eliki, is the godly soul. In its godly service. The Rebbe continues from Chesed. Of course, we go to the Gvura. What does Midas HaGvura in Avodas Hashem? So he says, "Lipara min Yerushalayim lo Shemein Shatayra." That the Yid literally means having a clean, a proper slate with the Rishayim, and to punish them with the punishments of Torah. Meaning, literally, para means to punish. And he says, clearly, so we become the punishing tool of society? Yes and no. The yes is, there has to be order in one's, in society. There's meant to be an order of discipline. People can't do what they want. Just like when you find somebody, God forbid, you've passed somebody in your community, and you see he's walking behind the other party and pickpocketing, taking his wallet. Are you just going to say, oh, I don't make sin? Politically correct, is it? Right? You don't say that. You say, excuse me, you can't do that. It's his. It's not yours. And so any other idea which is incorrect between man and his fellow friend, of course, we naturally express ourselves. In other words, express this notion of discipline towards the other party. And there's different levels in different areas. There's some ideas that we don't have to be the one who is formally the rabbinic figure or the leader figure in the community. Just the certain spontaneous expressions of discipline. This is what it means. Because I have this gvura, and I know Hashem doesn't like it, and more so, he dislikes it, and is so distasteful of that. If it's stealing, if it's doing something even worse, or different areas which we know Hashem not only dislikes, but he abhors. So we express, we do whatever we can, and of course it ought to be genuine, so everybody has to work on himself. It's not because I have a headache, I'm going to rebuke the other party. I'm having a bad day. Of course, it has to be genuine, but he doesn't even have to explain over here. Especially, he's saying that this Gvura is coming from the Nefesh Elikis. The Nefesh Elikis is a part chelik of the Kami Mal Mamash. Could you think of anything more pure than that? And if the Yid expresses his Gvura purely from the perspective of the Nefesh Elikis, of course it's genuine. But there's rule. People can't do what they want. Society can't do what they want. There is a phenomenon of rebuking the Rasha, the wicked, meaning this is some people going out of line, and even punish them with the punishments of Tanya. Now, there is, of course, the generic idea of Liparim in Shayim L'Anchamein She'atayra. Where do we find punishments? The Torah Hashem himself says. A person violates this idea of lashes. A person, Rahman violates. There is worse. There's Kaddish, Misam Shemaim, Rahman Slan, and there's even, from the perspective of Torah, there's actual death penalty, capital punishment. But today we don't have the Beis Hamikdash. There's a side issue. We don't have the Beis Hamikdash. We don't have the ability to actualize capital punishment. But from the perspective of Torah, you went out of line to such a degree. There exists this type of punishment. But just parenthetically say, it's not like, this is something which was very common, capital punishment. To the contrary, the famous Gemara says that a Bezdin which executes any party once in 7 years, there's even a version once in 7 years, is called so Bezdin Ketila, like they're aggressive. Ketila means that they're killers. But the same halacha says, what if they did have the need, based on the halachic circumstances, to perform execution, capital punishment every day? They're allowed to do so. That's why they are the Bezdin. The Gemara says, because we know that from the perspective of Torah, there's so many details, very extremely nuanced, extremely detailed. A bunch of things have to come together. And you're talking about seconds, in order for Bezdin to actually go ahead and execute capital punishment. But conceptually, it exists. So that's the Bezdin. And then there is the leader figure, or the rabbinic figure in a community. There is a need to discipline a community. And if it needs stronger discipline, that may be it, for the person himself, for his family, and for society. So it runs across the board, the formal, from the perspective of Torah, the original Bezdin, the leader figure in a community, but also people between themselves to make sure that there's discipline in the community, in people around us, which again comes from Gvura, of course, right? It's not Chesed, it's Gvura, but it's a genuine, it's a holy Gvura, it's a divine Gvura. I don't want things to go out of line. Hashem has a plan, and Hashem's plan is the most pleasant plan, or it's the best plan, of course, by definition, it's coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but namely we know that maybe it's a bit challenging to keep it like any other responsibility. Of course, you can easily, there's a part of us which would want to be the couch potato, as it's called, and getting up and doing the responsible thing every single day and going to work and so on. It's a challenge, but in the end of the day, that is where there's true pleasantness in life. And true pleasantness in life, like everything else, you have to make you make an effort towards this which is proper. The reward is right there, extremely rewarding, as we see evidently. Success, true contentment, and joy exist only where there's the implementation of responsible conduct. Conversely, when there isn't, it's easier on the spot, but it's on the onset. It will never work, it doesn't work, and many times with no time, it's a downwards slippery slope. So too over here, the idea of bringing discipline to ourselves, to community, to society, of course, it's a challenge, but we know that this is where we hold our communities together and make life truly pleasant, truly pleasurable, and truly delightful, which, like everything else, when there's Gevura, this ultimately brings a certain proper discipline. In other words, when there's discipline, it brings a very proper, healthy environment. And that works also education. The Poet Shlomo Melech says brilliantly, when you prevent the stick, so you're hating your child. Your child's not going to be happier if you don't discipline them, if everything is yes, and when they do something wrong, it's okay. They're going to be miserable, profoundly miserable. Conversely, when you do extend the stick, but the stick, of course, doesn't mean literally. It's namely figuratively. God forbid, the person shouldn't use aggressively a stick against nobody, certainly a child, which doesn't belong to you, to harm them physically. God forbid. The Rebbe once, just to point out, talking about discipline, the Rebbe once told a father that child doesn't belong to you. It's yours, but it doesn't belong to you. You could do whatever you want and hurt the child, namely physically. So when Shlomo Melech says "Chesach shifta seinu b'nai," means figuratively, you must discipline a child, not only for yourself or for society, for the child himself. The child will be, it's guaranteed that the child will be a happier child, a child which will grow up with inner contentment and true joy and elation, and will easily be able to build their own home. Where does it come from in the end of the day? To discipline a child, it's not an expression of chesed, it's clearly gvura. But yes, Gevura is essential. Gevura is a need in the relationship of father and child, master and servant, teacher and pupil, in every relationship. And again, when you're talking about community, societal, there is an idea of expressing the Gevura. Again, it ought to be a genuine Gevura, a Gevura coming clearly from the godly soul. Then it's authentic, then it's genuine, and then it has its perfect result, as opposed to, we don't have to negate over here. If someone's having a bad day and they throw a word of discipline which is disproportionate in another party, so it's certainly not coming from a godly soul. It's coming from very, very much from your animal soul. It's an animalistic experience you're experiencing at the time. And you're throwing your words on another party. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about over here. Here you're talking about Gvura coming from the Nefesh Elikis. The Nefesh Elikis is a Chelek Elokami Mal. It's part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Part of the unadulterated purity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Gvura is pure. We put him in a shayim to punish, in other words, to straighten out by a punishment. the Rishayim Elanshim Anshe Torah, and to punish them with the punishments of Torah. Again, it's every expression of this in its context, as we just mentioned. And then also pertaining oneself, he needs the Gvura. He gives another dimension of the same Gvura. He didn't cross over yet to the next Midah. To strengthen himself over his own Yitzhar Hara, which we know we need a lot of Gvura. It says in Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers, you conquer Yitzhar Hara. We know that you need Gvura for that. We need not to elaborate. Of course not. You need strength. Because Yitzhar Shalodim is gaber of kol yom, as much as you're using your gvura to overcome the Yitzhar Hara. The Yitzhar Hara is mizgaber, the Gemara says in Brachas, over the person every single day. And we know it, from the Gemara, but we know it more so as we navigate life on a daily basis. We have challenges from that very Yitzhar Hara, but we have the koyach, we have the ability, at least gaber al Yitzhar, that we strengthen ourselves, we triumph over a Yitzhar Hara. And we're going to for sure succeed, because as the Alter Rebbe explains, based on again the Gemara Brachas, Hashem is right there, and He sees our vulnerability with our Yitzhar Hara, and He assists us as long as we make the right decision, genuinely make the right decision. That I am going to overcome that Yitzhar Hara. Hashem stands right there and gives us the ability to actually overcome. So beautifully, eloquently explained. Alter Rebbe, Perik Yud Gimel, the 13th chapter of Likutei Amarim, the first segment. Again, a click away on this site or wherever you're learning Tanya, Yud Gimel, beginning of Yud Gimel, how beautifully the Alter Rebbe explains how the backdrop or the behind the scene through the lens of the Alter Rebbe, how it exactly works, that Hashem is assisting the poor, the vulnerable, the destitute, again in the area, especially when a person has that very strong war, namely when it comes to the subtleties of his neshama, vision, thought, and to overcome the Yitzhar Hara. It takes a lot of effort, but Hashem is standing there and giving you the opportunity. Not only giving the opportunity, He's assisting you. So is it me making the decision? It's Hashem's assistance, which allows me to be triumph over my animal soul, over my Yitzhar Hara. Of course it's about you. You're making the choice. But right then, as you make the choice, Hashem is opening up a new dosage, so to say, of your own reservoir of elokus that you will be guaranteed to overcome the Yitzhar, as long as, again, the choice is a genuine choice. It's an interesting lashon Alter Rebbe has in his end of Perek Yud Beis. Also worth it. Say a genuine choice. Alter Rebbe says when it comes to the machshava, especially, again, the subtle challenges we have, or the challenges with the subtleties of our nefesh, mainly when it comes to millisecond decisions. Like someone says, after 5 seconds, I took my eyes off that billboard. No, that's no good. 5 seconds in the context of Riyah and Shmiya and listen in vision or audio or thought, it's like eating a full sandwich or two on Yom Kippur, because here you're dealing with millisecond decisions. And Alter Rebbe there says, Techeyu, in a thought, an inappropriate thought, because he knows that Hashem does not want me to entertain my mind with that. Alter Rebbe says, Techeyu b'shtei yadayim, you push it away with both hands. What kind of expression is, especially the Alter Rebbe, which was very careful, generally careful in every word he wrote, but Techeyu b'shtei yadayim, like pushing away both hands, what's that supposed to mean? And the answer is, Alter Rebbe says, you have to be authentic, you have to do this genuinely. Yeah, sometimes we push away with one hand and we can invite it. We push it away with a for me. No, it's not for me, but somewhat we are okay with it. The Rebbe says, both hands. You're determined and resolute. That's not coming into my mind. And the moment it starts coming in, because again, the signals will always come. But the moment I realize, whoa, that's something that Hashem does not want me to entertain my mind with, I will push it out with both hands. And right there, Hashem is seeing your genuine approach, your authentic and genuine approach to that challenge. He will right away assist you. And again, this is milliseconds. This all happens in milliseconds. We think about a judge, which is again, it takes time to go. No, this is milliseconds. Hashem is right there coming in and assisting you. But the gvura you need, because you need to make the decision. So this is the gvura, the way it's expressed in Nefesh Elikis. another dimension of Gvura, Lizgab el Yitzrei, to one strengthen himself over Yitzhara, and L'Kadosh Atzma Muter Loi, which is another idea, not only to overcome the Yitzhara, but to sanctify ourselves, even this which is permissible, which is, how do you say, it's a parsha, important, and not only important sometimes in this idea to sanctify myself in this which is permissible. This is a litmus test in my relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, Tanya says, Kadeshim Tiyu Ki Kadosh Ani, that where do you see Hashem celebrating the connection with the Yid? And it says in Sifrei Musa, and Sifrei Kabbalah, and Chassidus, and this is really where it's at. This is based on, or the famous Ramban contributes to this idea, to be novel b'shus ha'Torah, to be gluttoned and indulgent in the permissible, and say, oh, there's a hechsher, or I'm allowed to do it. Look, and it says in Shulchan Aruch that you're allowed to, but this brings a person crass and gross even, and then he's supposed to take a siddur and talk to Hashem or relate to Hashem, and to have the same chalkeinu b'seira secha when you overly did it, even b'rishus ha'Torah, so to say, with the hechsher of the Shulchan Aruch, and therefore there's those even say that the Kaddish Atzmei B'Mutula is a deraisa, is a biblical law. There's a machlekes, is a deraisa d'Rabbanan, but there's even opinions it's a deraisa, because Torah says Gedeshim Tiyu. Gedeshim Tiyu is more of a generic term. What Gedeshim? Tell me what I'm not allowed to eat, or you told me what I'm not allowed to eat. Milk and meat I'm not allowed to eat, so I'm not allowed to eat it. I have to wait 6 hours. I know I have to wait 6 hours. I have to put on tefillin every day. What does it mean? Be holy. So simply translate, do Hashem's mitzvahs, you're going to be holy. But then I know, because I'm doing Hashem's mitzvahs, of course I'm becoming close to the holiest of holy, which is Hashem. So of course I'm becoming holy. What is the Kadeshim to you be holy? Because those who say it's a deraisa, it's a biblical command, even b'mutale, this which is permissible, this is which is permitted. Do you need it? Do you have to give in so much to your animal soul? To your bodily proclivities? You know you're good. It doesn't mean that the person has to eat grass and stones for lunch or for supper. No. You can be normal. Eat the sandwich, a normal sandwich, and be satisfied from it. Because we're human beings. Even though there's a whole school of mortification of body, because in the end of the day, we can appreciate the more a person does not give in, and again, there's a whole school of Talmidei Baal Shem. Even the Baal Shem Tov himself was didn't favor that train of thought or that school of thought of mortifying the body as an idea in its own. Conceptually, it seems like a great idea. Why do I have to give in to my animal soul or my bodily lusts and covets? Let me remain on the holy and pure and sanctified stage and arena. Let me remain there. Comes the Baal Shem Tov and says, yeah, if you remain there, you never have to come down into a body. Try to fuse the two. That your body and your animal soul should be a conduit to the Ratzon Hashem. And therefore, no need to formally mortify the body. But ultimately, the other extreme, to give in to the body's covets and lusts and proclivities, tightness of why do you need it? You're satisfied. You're okay. You're ready to bench, and your eye caught a chocolate, whatever. Be like, the Bali Musa speak about it's the idea. Your eye caught something else, and now you need it. You don't need it. You know you don't need it. Sometimes, maybe you do. If that's what's your, between breakfast and lunch, or lunch and supper, if you didn't eat that day, you want to take that piece of cake with a coffee, it's okay for the time. But right now, it's extra. So why are you doing it? Just to give in to because your animal soul is calling for it? That doesn't seem fair. We're a Yid. We're Yidin. It's a serious connection with a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why Hashem says, Kadeshim Tiyu, be holy. Even b'mutale, this is which is permitted, categorically permitted. A piece of cake is okay. And maybe for you even it'll be okay in another opportunity. But right now it's extra. Says Hashem, you have to sanctify yourself. Does it need gvura? Does it need extra strength? Yeah, of course you do. because it says it's mutter, and there's something which is again pushing you, your body and your animal soul saying, yeah, go ahead. So you got to say no. So it takes gvura, it takes a discipline with yourself. That's the gvura of the nefesh elikis, which gives the opportunity of the yid to be kadosh as hatzmut to sanctify himself, which is permissible. And before I go on, it's interesting. I think it's the in Kotsk, if I'm not mistaken, the Kotzker said brilliantly. He says he doesn't want his chassidim to fight with their bodies in this area of kadosh atzmim and mutalei. He wants them to be so occupied in this which is sublime, in elokus, in godliness, in Hashem's Torah, to be so passionate about it that they won't have even interest in dealing with the matters of body and animalistic desires. It's like somebody who won a lottery, as an example, and he's going to pick up his money, his check, as an example, and wife tells him, maybe eat lunch before. I'm not interested in eating lunch now. I'm going to do something much more. Or if he does eat lunch because he was compelled, you got to go. You have to sign a bunch of papers. It's going to take hours. Ask him the next day what you ate for lunch yesterday. He can't remember because he was so motivated in going to pick up that lottery. The results based on him winning that ticket, as an example. So many other examples. He's so excited in what they're doing. It doesn't carry any weight or significance by the party. So we see it also, again, even this which is not associated with Torah, mitzvahs, God, and godliness. This is what the Kotzker said. He wants his chassidim to be so involved in godliness that they should even have the need to focus and deal with the matters of the physical in a way which is mutter loy, the kiddush atzmer mutter loy. Automatically they will be kedoshim to you, they'll be holy because they're so involved in God, godliness, holiness, again, the divine, if it's Torah, mitzvahs, davening, and so on and so forth, living like a yid. But the mitzvah remains, and sometimes we know that with all the good talk, and we should try to incorporate this excitement of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we need not to deal with the details of this gvura, to hold myself back, and this which is permitted. But we do know at times, many times, not always it fits exactly, not always we have that particular motivation. And we need the gvura to overcome and to fulfill this mitzvah of kadosh atzmach, sanctify yourself with this which is permitted. The last is geder v'siyag l'Torah, and he goes on to put a fence to Torah. As we know that it says, Pirkei Avos as well, that as few siyag l'Torah, and this is also takes gvura. Siyag is a fence. You go in the subway, you always find a yellow line. What's wrong to go on the yellow line? Why do you have to go on the other side of the yellow line? You're not going in. You're not doing anything to fall into the area, with the dangerous area again, where the train crosses, as an example. But you get too close, you might fall. So they establish this yellow line to be on the other side. So it takes a certain discipline. I'm not going to go on this where it's marked. I'm going to make sure to be on the other side where it's marked. And so too when it comes to Torah. Hashem says, don't get too close because then you might fall. So make yourself a fence, literally a fence. What does a fence do? A fence doesn't just mark, it just helps the person that he should not get too close to the area which it would be dangerous if they fell. Doing an Avei Rachman Islam is very dangerous, meaning to say a person is falling into the abyss, chas v'shalom, with anything negative what Hashem says, not any negative thought or speech and action, this which is, Hashem says not to do, talk, or think. And doing that, and following that, a person falls as if some tzaddik once expresses himself. And Yimitol Rebbe, if I'm not mistaken, it brought to other places in Chassidus that spiritual death, by definition, is much worse than physical death, by definition. Even though a Yid lives in an Elam Hazeh and he does whatever he can to maintain the connection of body and soul, to do tshuva, in the end, to uproot any past negative behavior and so on. And this is what the virtue of living physically in this world, because tshuva ma'asim tovim is dafka precisely in this world, not in the world to come. But categorically, or by definition, of course, spiritual death is by far worse. So doing an Aveda, fall into the abyss of Tumah, Rahman al-Islam, which is in the end of the day spiritual death. So I put a fence up, stand away a little bit. Don't bring that into your house, and then have a challenge that chas v'shalom you should not impure your eyes, your thoughts, which is of course antithetical to any type of connection. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is the area that in this area HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it says he's saying, meaning to say he abhors when someone does not keep a clean set of eyes and thoughts and so on. So don't bring this something into your home, into your life, which you'll be challenged. Asu siyog latera, put up a fence. Does it take effort? Yes. Does you need gvura? Yes. You have that gvura as part of who you are as an nefesh elikis to execute the gvura when it's needed. In this case, to put up a fence to Torah that chas v'shalom you should not violate any mitzvah or mitzvahs leisas, a positive mitzvah or a negative mitzvah. In order, you should be able to maintain that perfect, seamless alignment with Hashem's Torah, ultimately with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because the fear of Hashem or the awe of Hashem, and his fear, because you know that you might come to sin if you don't put up that fence. So you utilize your gevura and do put up that fence. We'll learn one more midah over here. What comes after Rachamim? Comes Tiferes. And Tiferes, so Tiferes is usually aligned with Rachamim. We had in the very beginning, actually, of this chapter. We don't need to repeat it because in the very beginning of this chapter, it's mentioned many times, quite a few times in Sefer Tanya Kaddish, all over Chassidus, based on many, many expressions of Kabbalah, the connection of Tiferes and Rachamim. But here, he doesn't speak about Rachamim. There, if you look in the beginning of this very chapter, again, we need not to the first or second class of the chapter where the Alter Rebbe speaks about the Rachamim, the way Tiferes is expressed, or is in the end of the day, the Midah, that very character of compassion. As we explained, there's the whole idea of Rachamim. There's room for discipline. Nonetheless, I have Rachamanas, I have compassion. We see the combination of Chesed and Gvura. That's what's called Tiferes. True beauty is when you have a combination of two colors. Again, see that class. Click away. Beginning of Tezvav. But here he doesn't even go on to Rachamim. He says Tiferes, Lefares Hashem, B'Teirasi, to glorify Hashem, and Hashem's holy Torah, and Hashem's Torah rather, and different types of expressions of glorifying. Uludavka b'shvachav, and to cleave and adhere in Hashem's praises with all your different elements of your soul. To meditate with your intellect and your thoughts on the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the beauty of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the beauty of Hashem's Torah. That is the Tiferes. And also not only with your mind, also with your speech. To speak, to fabring about the beauty of Elokus, godliness, and Hashem's holy Torah, Hashem's holy mitzvahs, with a niggin. Introduce it to yourself, to your family, to society, the beauty of a life worth living, which is a life of Hashem's holy Torah and Hashem's holy mitzvahs, ultimately with Hashem Himself. We'll stop over here. Have a wonderful night.